On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Serene Highness, Prince Albert II, Supreme Prince of Monaco, and to invite him to address the Assembly. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président.
President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, Heads of States and Governments, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, please allow me to express my heartfelt condolences to the authorities of Morocco and Libya in the wake of the devastating events in these two countries. I would like to express the solidarity and the support of Monaco to the people of Morocco and Libya who have shown courage and remarkable resilience in these particularly difficult times. In 1993, I was taking the floor for the first time from this rostrum as head of delegation of the Principality of Monaco. This was what was at the 48th session of the General Assembly. My country celebrated the 30th anniversary of its admission last spring. My determination to do that, to make sure that Monaco contributes to the implementation of the Charter, is heartened, strengthened by the fact that current challenges oblige us to do that. This year, we're celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I would like to welcome the commitment of Eleanor Roosevelt, who played a decisive role in drafting this historic document, aiming at making sure that every human being can have their inalienable rights. In the recent decades, the United Nations has achieved gains that only multilateralism can allow for. For example, the Agenda for Peace, which was passed during the Security Council Summit in 1992, Agenda for Development, General Assembly in 1997, Millennium Development Objective in 2000, Sustainable Development Objectives in 2015. It is through working together that we've been able to move forward quite so significantly. Mr. President, Monaco was an observer to the UN when my father, Prince Rainier III, decided to take part in the Rio conference, in the wake of which we had the Agenda 21, which is customarily called the Rio Convention. And this participation in the Earth Summit was one of the trigger elements which resulted in the fact that the Principality started seeking full membership in the community of nations which gather here in this august chamber. The respect for the environment and wild fauna on land and sea and supporting science were fundamental priorities for the Princes of Monaco throughout the centuries. Today, what was a relentless commitment have become a duty for our survival. And that is why we signed the Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Convention on Climate Change, the Convention on Biodiversity, and then the Convention to Combat Desertification. These international treaties, they were added to thereafter, but they continue guided our action to preserve the planet from environmental disasters which can destroy all progress. In this regard, I would like to underscore to what extent the growing body of international law is the unsung success of our cooperation efforts within the UN, and recall that since our admission to the United Nations, we have become parties to 50 international treaties covering a large spectrum of topics such as human rights, disarmament, environment, or the law of the sea. In the course of this past year, the multilateralism in certain areas has shown once again its strength and its effectiveness because it continued and persevered. In December last, we have had a historic event when we adopted the Montreal Global Framework on Biodiversity, and then we concluded about 2 decades of negotiations by finalizing the agreement on biodiversity and high sea, which I had the honor of signing. And this binding legal instrument will have another decisive step in protecting and safeguarding the seas and the oceans. And these victories, which came out of our collective efforts, have to give us hope, because above and beyond the ocean and the biodiversity, they also show the very potential of the United Nations to build common edifices for us to live better in harmony with nature. Furthermore, it seems fundamental to me to be aware of these new instruments because they give us powerful tools to combat climate change. Amongst the indigenous people or island people, the sea is a fully fledged being. The crucial role of seas and oceans in regulating climate is clearly recognized now and enables us to handle this challenge holistically. Because make no mistake, we will only able to gain the battle on climate if we work together towards the implementation of the SDGs that we have set ourselves 8 years ago. There is not a moment to lose. Extreme climate events, floods, droughts, fires, whose frequency and intensity is only growing, already result in the suffering of millions of people and require from us to undertake urgent and drastic measures. Physical modifications of the marine environment and coastal areas, the acidification of the ocean, rising sea levels are other phenomena which are threats for the very existence of coastal communities in many countries. Secretary General, your determination to bring together the leaders of states, representatives of private institutions, of civil society within the framework of the Climate Ambition Summit is very timely. The very recent IPCC report has alerted that it once again showed us that our collective efforts are insufficient in order to fight this planetary scourge. Several months ago, we have started the first stage of assessing the implementation of the Paris Agreement. This will be finalized at COP28, but it cannot be simply a statement of failure. We need to, on the contrary, use this most recent opportunity we have to rectify the trajectory so as to make sure we do not raise the temperature more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. Ladies and gentlemen, let's face facts. Serious changes to our ways of life and our collective organizations are needed, and needed fast. We need to redouble our solidarity so justice and equity become keywords of this phase of our transition. In this context, Monaco would like to play its part. The government of the Principality will contribute to the replenishment of the Green Climate Fund to the tune of 3.3 million euros for 2024-2027. This is a 10% increase compared to the previous period, and Monaco is already a #1 per capita donor into this fundamental instrument under the Paris Agreement. Mr. President, for more than a century, Monaco has shown how our man and sea can coexist. And the question of oceans will be once again, 2 years after Samoa pathway, at the center of the deliberations of the 4th conference on SIDS and the 3rd conference on SDGs for Poland in Nice, presided by France and Costa Rica in 2025. Monaco decided, together with the organizers of this conference, to host sessions on blue economy, and the conclusions of that, I hope, will enrich the deliberations of this gathering. We do still have the unexplained phenomena of the cold stretch in the east of the Pacific Ocean, but the United Nations Decade on Ocean Sciences in the Service of Development provides us an opportunity to better understand the complex phenomena of climate change. Major countries have understood what needs to be done for our oceans. We are looking for water on Mars, but we had to wait for a generation to make sure that under the impetus of the president of the 77th GA, we had another conference on water last March. The young people of our nations place a very serious responsibility on us to make sure that we safeguard the air they breathe, the land where they grow, and the seas and the oceans, the cradles of humanity and key to our survival. And this fight will never be over. Mr. President, the conflict also undermined the environment and an additional obstacle to the implementation of the SDGs. It's been about 600 days now that Russia took the decision, in violation of international law, to launch a major-scale aggression against Ukraine. This was condemned several times by our Assembly, as well as humanitarian and environmental consequences. Here, yet once again, I'd like to express the solidarity of my country, given these tragic events and the destruction that the civilian population suffer every day. And the fights and the bombings resulted in pollution of soils and it resulted in toxic substances. Natural areas have been destroyed, and there is now a shortage of drinking water and the spread of diseases. It is inconceivable that in the 21st century, healthcare professionals are regularly attacked, that medical infrastructures are attacked in various areas of conflict. So I appeal once again for the protection of these professionals and for the protection of civilian populations. The world is now beginning to recover after the pandemic of COVID-19. I would like to welcome, therefore, the fact that this week we'll have several high-level meetings on major public health issues. And we need to draw lessons from this pandemic so as to strengthen global governance and build resilient and strong public health systems. Mr. President, amongst the issues of existential threats that we are facing, there is one which has become very widespread recently, and I am referring to, of course, to artificial intelligence, which has in it both at the same time an immense potential for the SDGs and unprecedented risks for peace and security. Looking for innovation is part of our very nature and needs to be supported when it's geared towards improving the lives of our people. We are, of course, fascinated by the advantages provided by digital tools that simplify our daily life, but we cannot ignore the potential dangers they represent. Artificial intelligence very frequently is more effective than man in many tasks. But just like the language of Aesop, it could be the best and the worst thing for humankind. Cyber attacks using artificial intelligence are already targeting critical infrastructure in hospitals and humanitarian operations conducted by the UN. Security and weapons industries use these techniques, and their potential leads us to an ethical problem. Can a machine decide on the human issue of life and death? These questions show that we all have a duty to build a framework of global governance and ethical norms dealing with artificial intelligence. Therefore, concluding current works underway on this is of particular importance. I welcome, therefore, works aimed at creating a high-level advisory body on this within the UN to work on international governance over artificial intelligence. Mr. President, our role has always been the role of moderator in what has been a peaceful country, and I remain convinced of the central role to be played by the UN in rebuilding the trust and reawakening global solidarity. This requires common efforts anchored in the solid multilateral system, which is faithful to the values and principles in the Charter of the United Nations. I'll conclude by voicing the hope that we'll succeed in improving the effectiveness of our organization so that it can carry out its initial mission to safeguard peace amongst nations and the well-being of our common humanity. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Sovereign Prince of Monaco for the statement just made and request protocol to escort His Serene Highness. The Assembly will hear an